This is the first episode of the Cosmic Grid. This is my brother, Aaron Moses Hernandez.
Aaron Moses, just for the world's sake.
And, again, he's my brother. Both share the same mother, different father. But I know you, because we're related. But for those people watching, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, just a rundown about who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
My name is Aaron Moses, artistically. I go to Aaron Moses. I am a poet, a musician, and an illustrator. I've published 2 independent comic books titled The Opossum. I've already illustrated 2 children's books for hire, and I am a music composer and on the works of putting together an album of sorts. Genre of music would have to be electronic synth, what you consider electro retro type sounds.
Okay.
And those are the things that keep me motivated, keep me moving, and but I've been fascinated since I can remember.
Okay, so you said you had 2 issues published from the your character, the Opossum.
The Opossum, yes. Mm-hmm.
How did you get started? What got you into creating this character?
The Opossum, to me, was always something very personal. It started off as very much like a personal journal, very much influenced by characters as Batman. If you were to see my comic book, you could see the very big influence of the Batman lore, his villains, and so forth. Later on, it started taking upon more influences from James O'Barr's The Crow. Has a very tragic story to it. It's very much a morality play, in sorts, and that's very much what the whole comic book is about. I've been able to self-publish 2 on my own with my own financing. They've gotten local attention, and I was even fortunate enough to have a good friend of mine, a good director friend of mine, Rick Medina, to go ahead and film a documentary about the process of my comic book called The Opossum Begins, which you can find online for free. That was a very interesting piece of that was done for me. That it showcased a lot of my passion for the character and for the story that I did, and why it took me so long to bring it out of fruition into a comic book when it was something very personal.
Why was it so interesting for you to have someone who's a friend, but also, I believe, a fan of your artwork and your comic book, your character? Why is it interesting to you that he chose you to make this short documentary, this short film?
I know that when he came to me earlier on those years, because I also mentioned I was a music composer, he had heard some of my music, and he was starting off doing a short film for some kind of a film festival. And he wanted to borrow one of the themes or songs that I was creating. And when he came to my so-called studio at the time, I was working on one of my Opossum books. And I told him the story, and him being from Brownsville, Texas, just as I am, and that the story takes place in Brownsville, Texas, intrigued him very much. I gave him the whole rundown on the story, and he was very captivated by it. So he had told me one day that he wanted to do something with me with it,
right?
On film. I normally take those kinds of things like, okay, it's flattering, whether it happens or not. It ended up being where 8 years later he came looking for me, knocking on my door, so to speak, and we ended up working on that documentary together, and it went on to win a couple of awards at some film festivals. Yeah. It actually got to go all the way to Sydney, Australia, and got to go to I think Germany, one of the film festivals. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to all of those festivals, but I managed to go to some of the ones in the Texas area. So, but I gave him all my thanks. He really poured his heart out and passion into making that documentary look as incredible as it did, with the animation and the pop out art that I gave him. It was intense. It was incredible. He even used the theme I made for my character at the end of the film.
Do you think it boosted the popularity of your character? Did you see any more response to the character yourself?
I think so. I'm going to say yes and no. I mean, there was a lot of people that came to me after that documentary and was interested in my story and bought my comic book and wanted to know more about what I was doing. And of course, everybody's waiting for me to finish the 3rd book. There was a lot of that. But because I'm an illustrator, like most people in the arts industry, and anything that's got to do with entertainment, it's such a very competitive field. So whenever you involve yourself in something like that, a lot of people will see this as not as a certain people. I'm not gonna generalize everyone, but certain people will view this as very much a competitive thing, you know, which is almost good in certain ways because that just makes them pick up their game on what they're creating, what they're doing, and makes them want to make what they're doing even spicier, hotter, more pop out, more interesting.
Right.
You know,
Creates competition.
it creates competition. So there was a lot of that. And there still is a lot of that, you know, which I don't mind at all. It just, you know, it gets a little intense when they take it too extreme, when it becomes more of a, you know, got to push you out of the way so I can come first kind of an attitude.
Right.
But that's pretty much how it's turned out after the documentary. It was a very much a split thing. It was I got a lot of good attention, and at the same time I did it.
Right.
You know, so a lot of that.
The other thing was we were talking earlier before filming the whole you being a part of the film society here in Brownsville.
Mm-hmm.
Was that part of the departure from the documentary? Did it kind of is that what got you into that realm?
Being a part of the film society helped me to venture out into another creative avenue.
How did you find it though?
It all started with me getting involved with Rick Medina's documentary. I also started getting involved with a good friend of mine, Jackie Marie, with her independent films, as she would look me up for some illustration work, for storyboarding, and then later on she had me do some extra work here and there. I ended up doing a piece of soundtrack for one of her first films. Of course, it got changed after, but you know, I became involved with the local film people here in this town. So from then on, I started getting more involved in it, and they would look me up and call me up for, you know, if I wanted to come in as an extra for this film or that film or something extra for this other little short piece, you know, which I'm incredibly excited about and flattered about too, because I view acting as another form of art. You know, it's a way of expressing. It's another way of creating. If you really want to, like, you know, think about an actual thespian, how they create a character of themselves to portray it on film, you know, I find that incredibly interesting. So I feel that I feel that everything that started into my pot all has to relate to art, you know, art in a certain sense, you know.
Right, and I'm just going to revert back to, you know, since we're talking about this character, the Opossum. I know you personally, and I know you're not into technology, and technology is not your friend, but you read these comic books and you read your characters, and they're filled with these, you know, mystical powers, these technological gadgets that are, you know, that help them fight crime and, you know, get away from danger. Is this like, and you even have a guy in the comic book who's kind of like a Lucius Fox.
Yeah, like Joel Pena. He's the tech person for the Opossum and stuff. Yeah.
So me knowing personally that you're not into technology, how did you incorporate it into these comic books? How did you make it relatable?
Well, I've always had a very big utmost respect for science and technology. I respect it to the utmost, you know, highest esteem. You know, having said that, you know, I only wish I could have, you know, gotten more involved in knowing more of the technological side of things. You know, but for some reason.
But wouldn't you say that you do with? I mean, science and mathematics is kind of, you know, intertwined with the music you play, the strings you strum of a guitar, the keys you play on.
Well, yeah, I mean, but basically those things you're pretty much just putting it into like a basic context. You know, if you know the basics of something, you know, and you're passionate about something else back here, then those things should fall into like place. You know, almost like a checker piece. You know, you know where the slots go, so you're pretty much putting them in there. Because I'm also a music composer, and I've had to learn a few chords on my own. To try to get some of the songs to come out, you know, on time and on rhythm, with the obligator and the timing piece. You know, there goes again, like, you know, like your mathematics. You need to get everything precise and when to come in on a beat, when to come in on a sound. If not, the whole song's gonna sound off.
Right.
You know. So yes, I have had to like discipline myself to get to learn those things and to make that stuff, you know, bridge correctly and stuff like that. Has it made me any smarter in the field of technology and science and math? I wouldn't say. You know, I don't think. You know, I feel like I've learned a trick or two. You know, kind of like, you know, like when you teach you know, an old dog new tricks kind of thing. You know, that's pretty much how I go along with it. You know, what I want to start learning now is how to get my music station on my computer so I can start recording my own music. I'm having to go to an individual who's got a studio, who's a very sweet guy, you know, but there is some finances in there, and I'm having to have him record my music, you know. So I'm hoping that down the line, especially now with the technology so far advanced, I can get something together where I can start recording my own, on my own. You know, that's my next goal and stuff.
Which is something you're working on with your song "Women of Night a Day."
Yes.
You're working on a music video.
Yes,
with,
correct. With Omer Garcia III, who's an illustrator, and now he's going to be credited as a director. That's
fantastic, man. I can't wait to see it. And I mean, everything here, everything you've shown me is just an inspiration for me. Obviously, you're my brother, so it means a little bit more because I've had more time with you, I guess. But this is the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, because I mean, you love the things that you do, and I've seen you, you know, fight tooth and nail to get to where you are today. And the whole never giving up and working on your product and having, you know, seeing the responses from people outside is the biggest eye-opener for me, because you just go out and do it, and that's something that I think I need to aspire to do, because there's no reason I shouldn't.
Of course.
And doing all this is really just showing me that
it all comes down. It all comes down to passion. It all comes down to how much you want
it. No, absolutely. And I mean, from I guess what people would be asking is, what got you into the Opossum? Who is this Opossum? Why did you know? We all know why Batman is Batman. Why is the Opossum the Opossum?
Well, the Opossum really, he spawned out of like tragedies and just a form of my depression that I went through as a youngster, having to grow up, you know, being bullied a lot, being picked on a lot, just being alienated, you know, just not fitting in into any kind of thing I was supposed to fit in with my family or anything around me and stuff like that. I always felt like I was an outsider, and then having to go to school and having to feel the same way, and then plus being picked on and all that. So the Opossum was like my vessel to escape from that, you know, my way. You know, I always aspired to seeing how Batman, how his Bruce Wayne character, you know, came out of something so dark and so tragic and grew himself into something so amazing as a detective, as a you know, a skilled fighter, to get himself, you know, amped up and prepped up to not let any of those horrific things happen to anybody else, you know. That's kind of like how I viewed myself as this character, which in one point was even going to be taken as an actual thing. As I discussed in the documentary, I almost went as far as actually, you know, developing some sort of a suit, very much like the way you see in the Kick-Ass movie, and actually going out and taking it upon myself to do some hurting on some bad people that live around our neighborhood. You know,
then you'd end up getting your ass kicked.
Yeah, I would have ended up getting my ass kicked, maybe even worse than that. I probably would have gotten killed. But you know, thank God for that. And then, of course, later on in the years, you know, I met, you know, I ended up getting into a relationship, and I fell deeply, deeply in love with this particular person, and you know, like a lot of tragic stories, it ended up where, you know, she had to leave abruptly without even letting me know or anything like that. Whatever emergencies there must have been at the time, I still don't quite understand, but that left a very big. You know, like an emptiness in me, you know, kind of like almost like a way a tragedy would leave somebody with an emptiness, you know. And of course, you hear these kinds of stories, you know, from a lot of people that have had, you know, their loved ones leave them, or their girlfriend leave them, or whatever.
Heartache and heartbreak.
Heartache and heartbreak, you know. So I had made the decision at the time to either, you know, continue feeling depressed and continue letting it drag me on, you know, to just lightly want to live into another day, or make this into a story. Make it into a story, let it bloom into something else, and vent out through there. And again, that's what the Opossum did for me. It became where I used it as, in the comic book, the Aaron Hernandez character, who's supposed to be, Aaron Moses Hernandez character is supposed to be me, but in the book, he's got a fiance who was gunned down by a rival drug dealing gang that lived next door to her. You know, which is not too far from the truth from the actual person I was in love with at the time. So, I mean, not the killing.
I was gonna say, that's pretty far from the truth. But
not the killing part, but where she lived, right? So that's pretty much how it felt to me. Like if she had just been gunned down and killed and all that.
So the Opossum character didn't come to mind until you broke up with her, or you guys?
No,
were,
it was the Opossum had already come to mind beforehand, but it was used as something else.
And that's what those first sketches you see in the
those
documentary.
the first sketch you see in the documentary. You know, it was more like just a vent out.
Right.
Now with this girl leaving me and me having this like this emotional emptiness, I gathered the full story and created it into that. Yes.
Okay.
And it turned into that. You know, so come years later, come to 2006. It was my wife, Jessica Martinez, who took it upon herself to tell me that, you know, that she had a lot of faith in what I was doing and my creation, and she felt that this would actually work as a contemporary comic book.
Right.
You know, and I didn't really believe in any of that because there's never been a comic book based in my hometown, you know, or anything like that, you know. Until I saw someone else, you know, do something related to the Valley and him having his own comic book hero as well. So once I saw that, I pretty much looked at her and I saw that and I said, okay, I guess you're right. I guess it can be done, you know. So come 2007, we see the release of issue number 1 of the Opossum, you know, and it gives off like, you know, the hero coming in, you know.
Actually, today is what, 10 years, or was that?
It's been 10 years.
10 years today?
10 years, yeah. 10 years.
There we go.
I'm kind of like celebrating it and I put it on Facebook and stuff. So it's been 10 years. It's coming 2018. It's going to be 11 years.
So that's what this Cosmic Grid episode's going to be, the 10-year anniversary of the first
Opossum
issue.
Number 1, you know. It was a team effort putting that book together. Let me tell you, it wasn't.
How did that come to be? How did you create that whole first issue? Because it was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. It was a lot of helping hands. My hats off to, you know, my good friends Elevera, who was with me almost every day, putting the structures to the background. I mean, we really were like testing the waters on a lot of that first issue. You know, you see that first issue, there's a lot of stuff that's gritty. I still feel that there's a lot of stuff that could have been corrected, but you can feel the passion in the first pages, you know, because there was a lot of like work that went into that, and what we were venturing off into stuff that we didn't know was going to turn out right. We didn't know how it was going to look. You know, it was just like a shot in the dark, really. You know, just us standing over people's shoulders and seeing what it is that they do to make that work. You know what I mean? So we did a lot of that later on in those months. I was fortunate enough to meet my good friend Omer Garcia III, the illustrator, the individual that's directing my video, and you know, he had more insight on the comic book ins and outs. You know, he's a huge fan just like I am. And you know, he gave it more of a where to go, how to get this thing printed, kind of a push as well. You know, did the cover for me for issue number 1, which I still hold to this day as one of my, you know, precious treasures and stuff like that. So it was a team effort, man. It was not done just by myself. It was a lot of hands in the pot that made this thing, you know, take off to where it is now.
What advice could you give someone who's currently in your shoes that you were in 10 years ago, trying to get this first comic book out, this first issue of?
Well, again, it's all about passion, man. Because you can't really make any excuses in today's world about what you want done or you don't want done. You know, I mean, it's like,
because you're someone who struggles with finances.
Exactly.
And this is something that takes money to bring.
Yes, especially when you're a self-publisher, you're always gonna spend some money on this. There's no way around it.
How did you overcome those obstacles? What did you have to do did you have to sell your house, sell your cars, sell your children?
It didn't go to those extremes, but I mean, it would just be like something where, you know, I was working at the time, my wife was working at the time, or we would wait for a tax return and we would get like a big chunk of it to finish completing this, or to get a printout of so many of that, you know, and stuff like that. You know.
What was the most expensive thing you had to really put your money into to get this out?
The printings of the book.
Really?
The printing of the book. You know, they're done on an online demand print, which I have no problem with. The company is Kablam. They're extremely good at their material. They use, you know, very high quality printing, very good. You know, I deeply recommend them, but they are expensive. They take a 60% of the printing cost. You know, I don't know about now if it's gotten a little bit higher now because they've gotten more people on their roster. You know, as they also have their own shop called indieplanetshop.com. But I recommend that if you're starting, that's one of the options you can have if you just want to see what the book looks like. If you want to give it a shot and just give, because it's a print on demand. You can either have print 1 or 20 if you like. There's also offset printing, which is something that you'd have to print on multiple copies in order to get a good deal out of that. That's a little bit pricey. Well, that's a little bit pricier, but it could come off to like almost like a better deal all the way around when you order like a high quantity of books like that, which is what I'm thinking about doing sometime in the future with these later books.
Okay, with these later books, you're working on the 3rd issue. You
Yes,
said you had 2 published already.
Yes, I'm trying to finish the 3rd issue. I've got in the works another story that I got cooking up that I'm gonna try to see if I can get somebody to do the work for me, because I want as much as I love the style that I've created for the Opossum, I want almost like a different flavor for this other creation that I got going on. But we'll see if that gets into play as well. I'm still also in the market as a freelance illustrator. So at the time that while these things are cooking up in the back of the stove, so to speak, I'm also trying to put myself out there for more work. Trying to get more work in the illustration world. Which is right now a very competitive thing. Thanks to I would like to say thanks to the superhero movies, there's a lot of like a lure to becoming a good artist, becoming a good cartoonist, illustrator, trying to get work for like the companies like Image, Dark Horse, big ones, DC and Marvel.
Right.
So there's a lot of people that are in the race. And when I say a lot of people, we're talking about thousands of people.
And does that surprise you a little bit? Because you growing up in the 80s, 70s.
Well, I was a child in the 80s, and then my teenage years were in the 90s.
You see this huge decline in comic books, and the popularity for comic books is they're not making as much money. They're not really in high demand, not very popular. And
comic books have always had a downfall of very much like a Dracula syndrome, where they'll stab them once, but then they'll come back to life another time. You know what I mean?
Right.
They always have like a fluctuation throughout the generations and stuff like that. But I don't. If you ask me, do I see a decline of comic books? Not necessarily.
Well, not in this, but didn't you see it back in that day?
In the late 90s, yes.
Right.
In the late 90s, yes. But there's still a lot of. I saw a lot of people, not succeeding in their big grand of scheme comic book projects, but because nowadays there's things like Kickstarter, Patreon, GoFundMe, there's a lot of opportunities for you to really pump your own material out. You know what I mean? Even if it's just a one shot, or if you're planning to do just 2 books, you can publish 1 book. You can do that. I deeply tell it to everybody. If that's your goal, if you have a goal to make a comic book, then there's no stopping you from at least making just 1.
Right.
Right. So they can do that. It's just there's not a lot of math and science to that. It just takes a lot of extreme discipline and a lot of hard, long days alone.
So dedication
and passion to get this thing done. Exactly. But yes, it could be done. It can be done.
Well, I'm a man of science. I study the universe and the language of the universe. How do you feel about your place in space, your place here on Earth, and do you feel small in this universe, or do you feel big, and why?
The times I do contemplate about the bigger parts of this world always tend to overwhelm me sometimes. I get very overwhelmed easily and stuff, but I never stop from being extremely inspired by things. I'm extremely inspired by just the audacity of space, like the wow, like the could be the possibilities, the what we can find, the what could be out there. Of course, all of that just drives the imagination to other avenues. So yeah, I have so many aspirations for that. I love sci-fi stories, sci-fi movies. I love all that kind of stuff that explores those subjects. I'm very fascinated by all of that kind of stuff. So I think anybody like yourself that gets himself involved in the astrological and astrophysical and the deep thoughts of space, I think that's very that's very very therapeutic in some shape and form, because I mean you're becoming one with something that's that's been here for billions of years, even further than we could ever imagine and stuff. So yeah, I mean that's incredibly exciting. It's like I really love putting that into like a story perspective.
When was the first time you learned about space and planets? And because as you know now, there's only 8 planets because Pluto was
I heard about something like that. Yeah,
pretty much demoted to a dwarf planet.
Demoted.
And so, like, were you taught these planets in school? The one, you get the Mercury all the way to Pluto, or
yeah.
And then, like, when did you figure out that Earth is a planet? That we look out into the cosmos and we see Saturn through a telescope with its beautiful rings, and we see this gigantic, almost the size of a star for Jupiter, and well, not necessarily, but it could be. It's gigantic, filled with helium and hydrogen, but you see these through a telescope. And like you said, the audacity, we're in awe, we're dumbfounded by this beauty, the celestial beauty. And the first time we saw Earth through other eyes, or through cameras, through when we went to the moon, and we have that footage, Earth rising. Like, do you have any sort of recollection or memory when you figured out that this is a planet just like the rest?
Well, I mean, like a lot of people, I mean, I learned a lot about, space and the planets through grade school, and elementary and middle school and all that, and how everything revolves in such a perfect order without hitting each other and stuff like that, which is very fascinating, which raises up a lot of questions about what could be out there, what could be behind all of that kind of stuff, whether you want to place something with faith, or you want to place something with science. That's always going to be a tug of war with many people, and which I find interesting in some certain ways.
Do you think science will ever be able to answer all of those questions?
I don't know. I want to say yes. I really do. I don't know for sure. I think that that science is very good at opening our eyes to like a lot of things that we weren't used to. And that it has been able to explain the unexplained. But there's still so much mystery to this world and to this universe that I don't know if science can still unlock any of that kind of stuff. I'm not too sure, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because I mean we can still play that out in our own psyche as something that we can aspire to, or something that we can fear.
That's the next. Because do you think science takes away from the beauty of not knowing?
Not at all.
No,
not at all.
I
think science has a beauty of its own. I mean, it unravels things that, the workings of how a plant arose and stuff like that. There's the chemical reactions to how those things come about. I mean, that's
right.
I think that's a beautiful thing.
Well, there's this physicist I really am, I'm fascinated by. He's a past physicist, Richard Feynman. And he had this artist friend that who would teach him how to draw, and he says, he tells Richard Feynman, you as a physicist, as a scientist, well, me as an artist, I look at a flower and I see all the beauty, the bees coming and sucking out the nectar from the center of the flower, and the petals, and the green of the stem. But you as a scientist, you break that all apart and you destroy the beauty because of how you interpret why the green stem is green, and why the nectar is in the center and the petals are around that center of the flower. But just like you, I believe the same thing, that science doesn't take away from the beauty of of nature. If anything, it enhances the grand scheme of things.
Unfortunately, there's going to always be people that want to be nearsighted. They want to be not nearsighted, I guess, one-track minded. I guess I could use that.
Right.
And they're going to always want to just see things one way. They're not going to want to explore any kind of possibilities. That's, hey, whatever floats their boat, everybody's got their thing, and that's okay. But, it's almost a shame that, they're not giving any possibilities to anything outside of that, outside of thinking the box, And I know that I relate a lot of that to my style of art in the way I create things, because even in my look of my, not to get away from the science thing, but even in my look of my opossum character, I've had many artists come up to me saying, why didn't you make it more simpler? Because people love...
So?
Because, a lot of people, a lot of illustrators, a lot of illustrators that I've seen in the day, they've made their characters very simple, just
with spandex.
Spandex, one piece here, maybe two piece there.
With an emblem.
Yeah, an emblem and all that, or sometimes nothing and just a mask. You know what I mean? And that's very simple, and it makes it very easier for them to draw, which is a lot of times why they take that route, And I love those things. I really do. I mean, I'm a fan of a lot of people's creations that when they put them together like that with a good story hinged behind it. I mean, I'm totally jazzed when I see that stuff. But I've always had it in my mind to do things differently, to do things, not to complicate anything, but I've always wanted to stick out from what somebody else is doing. You know what I'm saying? So when I developed the look of my character, I wanted him to have a piece here, a piece there, a different design here, almost like a fashion designer. I didn't want him to look simple just because it was going to be easier to draw.
Right.
I wanted him to stick out and say, that's unique, And I've had people tell me that too, that what I did was unique. The look of my character is unique, it was very flattering hearing that, because that was really what I was going for. And I do that with a lot of things, even with my music making. If I hear a song sound this way that inspires me, well, yes, I'll be influenced by that, but I always want to put my touches to it that's going to make it different, more unique, a little more experimental. You know what I mean?
Little your own.
Little my own. Which is what I think creativity is all about. It's you, you putting your own flavor to what it is that you're making.
All right, now talking about music, because I love music too. So, different styles from the music that you like, but a little bit of both, right? But the music I listen to is more vocal, more lyrical, and as the years pass, these lyrics become a little bit softer, and then they change a little bit. Maybe they get harder. But that being said, the time that it takes for these bands to go from where they started to where they are 10 years from now, just like your comic book.
Yeah.
Would you say, because we were talking about how you didn't really fit into school, and you maybe felt like the black sheep of the family, and things weren't, going your way, and it got you into this, state of mind where you create this character on a sheet of paper, and you have a story to back it up. Do you think, with the time that you've worked on this character, that those types of states of mind, that mentality has switched a little bit? Maybe things are a little bit better off for you, that you can't really put so much anger or hate into this.
Well,
or, how do you think that works? Because you listening to Depeche Mode,
yeah.
You go from listening to them from
Well, everybody. I think everybody. Not just to put myself into the pot, but I think a lot of young people, they go through an oppression state, and a very impressionable state when they're young. You're always going to feel, at some point a little bit of an outcast and all that kind of stuff. So I felt that those years were very good at when you want to create something, and I feel that that's what's happened with a lot of artists. Is like some of their best creations have come through oppression. When they feel that they're oppressed, or when they feel that things aren't working their way, or when they feel that that they have they have nothing to live for at times. That this is their way of venting out, and sometimes you get incredible, beautiful works of art.
Right.
When you see these things. So I think that that's really what I feel what happened with me. During my younger years. As I created my character and other little stories here and there, and my music as well. It's developed into stages. If you ask me now, like how my state of mind has changed compared to then, well, I still feel a lot of oppression through a lot of things that happen to my life on a daily basis. I can't say that every day is going to be sunshine and roses.
Mm-hmm.
And because of those things, it does make me think of things that I can create with, things that I can put together and stuff like that. It makes me want to write something down to kind of like express myself and vent out whatever it is I was feeling at the moment and stuff like that. So I don't know if I'll ever come to a point in my life where I don't feel to weighed down by the world to not do anything creatively, because I mean I feel that the world is a very big place. It's a very scary place. It's something that makes me think twice about a lot of things that I would or wouldn't do. So having said that, that's where the creative process comes in. You know what I mean? So I don't think I'll ever let that go.
What do you find scary about this world?
It's people. People in general, really. It's just
scary motherfuckers, right?
Well, there's a lot of scary people in this world to begin with, yeah. I mean, it's just that there's so much evil intent that it's just mind-boggling how anybody out there that has those kinds of thoughts in their mind really exists. You know what I mean? So it's just, it's good material to write off on, to tell good stories on, but, I don't aspire to anybody becoming a serial killer or going off and killing anybody or hurting anyone and stuff like that. But it's just, I take it as, art reflecting life. And that's got to be, one of the things that life projects a lot, is a lot of evils that men and humans do, particularly,
But that's something, I guess, that I can follow up with, I think that, yeah, humans are terrible people, but there's also humans that counteract
of course,
those other people, and
there's always a yin yang. You're always gonna get the light side of things and the dark side of things.
Well, don't say always, because now what I was gonna talk about was the artificial intelligence, because something that I can foresee or can kind of imagine. I listened to this Joe Rogan podcast, and he's always talking about how the artificial intelligence is basically us. Evolving into this artificial intelligence, like we were in this caterpillar phase, kind of, we're creating these gods that we are able, or we technically should be able to transcend into, to upload our minds and link up our, our
cerebral,
I don't know if you want to call it a soul or whatever, but our being into these machines that could possibly last for hundreds of thousands of years, get us into other planets and explore other galaxies and solar systems that way. Do you see that ever happening? Do you see these machines actually taking over, or us transforming into these artificial?
Definitely, I definitely do. I mean, you see it now with everyday upgrade and everyday technology. It's like,
Does it scare you?
Sometimes it does. Sometimes it inspires me. Again, like I've told you, it's good material to write off on. Mm-hmm. We've seen countless science fiction movies on stuff like that: Matrix, Terminator, Blade Runner. Yeah, so those things are very inspiring. In that aspect and stuff like that. Does it scare me? Well, it makes me think. I try not to let it bother me until I have to get to that bridge before I cross it. So I don't really ponder too much about those kinds of things, even when it's talked about. I guess I just have to wait and see what the result is, whether it is going to be something as almost devastating as what many of those movies predict and stuff like that. I'm not too sure if any of that stuff is gonna play out the same way. I want to say no, but at the same time, knowing human error, I'm sure there's going to be something wrong in the AI system somewhere, so it's just, I guess it has to be seen. But no, I don't ponder too much on any. I don't have too much thought on what any of that's gonna bring or behold and stuff like that. I try to live looking at the future, like one day at a time, like a lot of people. Just try to get one thing going, get another thing going, and if that goes, I have social media like everybody else to tell us, predictions of the future or what's going to happen from this point on. But I think if anybody is going to say that's a tragedy of science, I don't necessarily think so, because again, like I told you, what we do in this life, what we put in anything is a reflection of ourselves, really. Just like you just said it earlier. If we create an AI and it ends up, wanting to, hurt us or disobey us, that's really something that was a human emotion that was put into that.
Right.
Because as humans, that's where we are. We're imperfect, and that's pretty much what it is. It's something that's not perfect, making something that's not going to be perfect either. It might be perfect in technological sense, but when it comes to making some of those non-human decisions, that might be where we're going to put our foot in our mouths. That might be where we're going to make our mistake. But it's to be seen. Like I said, I try not to. Again, I try not to put too much thought into that. I think there's way too many things going on right now that deserve more of my attention than any kind of like AI scare in the future or anything like that.
Well, that's good. Well, this I guess will kind of start tapering off and kind of end the episode here with I guess I'll ask you, trying to come up with 2 questions that I can ask all my interviewees.
Okay.
And one of them has to be, if you could, what do you see yourself doing to change the world?
Well, just being a good person in my own right, I think is enough for the grand scheme of things. It's just
That's a cop-out answer.
Why is that?
What do you mean, just you being yourself is...
I see me being a good person.
Oh, being a good Samaritan.
A good Samaritan, yeah, that's right.
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't. I thought you... just me being me will change.
No. Me being a good Samaritan is what I said. Well, is really the way I see my contribution to the grand scheme of things. It's like me helping out the lady across the street, me helping out my mother, or whoever needs help here and there. If I can take my shirt off my back and help this particular individual, I'll do stuff like that. You know what I mean? I think that's as much as I can do at the moment.
Who do you give credit for that altruism, that good kind-heartedness that you have to help others?
Like, what do you mean? Like, who?
Because going out and helping a lady cross the street is not something every ordinary person would tend. Just being kind-hearted and doing good.
Like, where does that stem from? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, where do you think? Because I'm the same way, and I think I'm very kind-hearted and do kind for others too. But to be honest, I think I was talking to Mom yesterday, and she was telling me how she had to do this border patrol, what is it called, the academy for the border patrol, and she passed, and they gave her the uniform. But when she realized how she had to treat these people like dogs and animals, it just wasn't for her. No matter how much money they were going to give her, she decided not to go with it and not work for that company. And so then it made me feel like it's just something that's in our DNA. It's just something that, maybe we got.
It's possible, yeah. It's possible. I do feel that there are some people that have a hindering because of where they came from to do something that's not noble. It's not right. But I always tell everybody who has that excuse of, well, I wasn't made that way. I always tell them, well, you were given common sense.
Right.
It's not taken away from you. So I normally don't use that for anybody's excuse when they don't do anything right for anybody. It's like, I don't care if you were born right out of if your father was a serial killer or if your mother was a prostitute or anything like that. That should not make you one of them. It's you are your own individual.
Right.
And if you have the tendencies to do whatever it is that you want to do because that's where you stemmed from. Well, you were gifted common sense. You're not
and a voice to go.
Yeah.
Seek
you're
help.
not gonna put hot charcoal in your mouth.
Right.
Right. Because somebody tells you it's the thing to do right now.
Unless you're giving me $1 million, I'll put all those charcoals in my mouth.
So, point being is that you have common sense, man. You're
Right.
gonna know this is wrong or this is right. You know what I mean? Now, whether you take action or not, that's up to you.
Right.
That's up to you. Whether you want to do something about it, that's completely in your hands.
And I guess the second question is, what do you want to bring into this world in the next 5 to 10 years? Let's just say 10 years.
No, I don't necessarily want to bring into this world anything. I'm I mean, I'm excited about a lot of like the upgrades to technology. Like, you know, I still want to.
No, but you personally, because you know, to change the world, you said being good to other people. In the next coming years, being good to people, and what else do you have to offer? What else are you bringing?
Oh,
is it your music? Is that the main thing?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know,
just
I feel
art in general.
Art in general. My creativity. I mean, that's not only because it benefits me, but you know, I think that, you know, there was somebody who told me once. It was like, you know, like, what are you buying comic books for? What are you making art for? You know, that's nothing to live for. You know, you're gonna use your money, use it for food, use it for that. That's true, but what do we live for? You know, what do we live for? You know, if we didn't have art in our lives, if we didn't have entertainment, if we didn't have anything to inspire for, we're living on a ticking clock. If you think about it, I mean, yeah, we can survive,
right? But doesn't that just bring up the point? Does anything mean anything at all?
No, it brings up the point that, you know, there's a meaning to what I do. There's a meaning to what any artist, any illustrator does, any entertainer. You know, it's a joy that they get out of doing something creative, and it's an inspiration for people like me to aspire to one day say, I can reach that, I can do that, I can do what he did, because I think that's incredible. I think that's awesome. It's magic. It's a magic thing that you know, when you see it as a kid, a magic trick. I mean, you're left in. Wow, when you see a new iPhone or a new device that can do something spectacular, I mean, doesn't that leave you in awe? That's what this is all about. That's what we live for. We live for it because we want to continue to open that part of our souls into something beautiful that can open our eyes and just wake up and say, this is why I live. I live to see this amazing thing. It's not evil, it's not good, it's just a thing that just surprises me on a daily basis.
And that's how we're going to change the world, baby. But before we head out, where can these people pick up your comic book?
They can go to indieplanetshop.com, and they can just look for the Opossum issue number 1 and the Opossum issue number 2. They're both there.
And if one of these people is interested in hiring you for some freelance artwork,
Aaron Moses on Facebook or A&A Studios. And if they're curious about my song Woman of Night and Day, they can go to Bandcamp, bandcamp.com, and just look for Aaron Moses. I'm under there, and I've got my song there, Woman of Night and Day. All
right. Well, that's pretty much all the plugs. You have anything else coming out? You want to shoot out what's coming? Where can they get your documentary?
That's available online too. TheOpossumBegins.com. They could either see it free online, or they could just go straight to my Facebook and message me, and they could purchase one directly through me.
Okay. Well, you heard it here, guys. Aaron Moses, my brother, the Opossum in the flesh. Appreciate it, brother. You mean a lot, man.
All right, my man.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
You're the bomb.
The bomb or the